All right, now we're here for part two. All right, guys. All right, who was next? Where did we leave off at on the last segment?
I'm not sure. I think we ended pretty good, but we can
Okay,
continue.
okay.
We were
Well,
talk we finished up talking about the cover up, the attempted cover up, the handling of Walt.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. And like I said, nothing surprises me anymore. And another thing too, what's getting me here is, for example, the idea of a virtual reality has been that what we see here is not base reality. In other words, it's not real. We have the illusion that it's real, but it's not really real. And this has been going on for years. I know even Elon Musk about 4 or 5 years ago, he was asked the very same question if we were living in a virtual reality, and he said that the odds were 1 billion to 1 that this is base reality, that this is actually real. Yeah, I mean, even the super genius, himself, is thinking that we are living in basically an illusion. So, I mean, with that said, what do you guys think? I mean, what's your opinion about, is this real, or is this just is this just an illusion?
Uh, well, we've been in it for as long as we can remember. You get peaks out of it. For example, people might indulge in psychedelic experiences when they get a glimpse out of it, or maybe in the dream state they get a look out of it. And then you have the whole realm of near-death experiences where, because of resuscitation technologies, people are brought back that otherwise wouldn't be brought back. And not all of them, but enough of them have some pretty outlandish tales that will tell you that when they're there, that seems more real than this does, and that they are actually depressed about coming back here.
Oh yeah. Again, that's the way I look at this thing here. This is not real. I mean, I think and I always have, this next question you have to ask yourself, okay, if this is not real, why the hell am I here? Why do I have consciousness? Why do I have the ability to think? Sometimes more logical than others. Why am I able to, what is the reason for being here? And I think uh, this gentleman I listen to all the time. His name is Cliff High, and he was talking about that the universe loves novelty. In other words, it throws all these players onto the board and gives them free will to produce or to create, to make things happen that normally would not happen. Art, music, whatever it may be, buildings, inventions, that kind of a thing, just to spice things up, just to create, just to give the this infinite consciousness something to play with and to be entertained by. And I think that probably makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
I would actually agree. I think that consciousness creates reality, and that the sum of all reality is the sum of all consciousness. We do get random variables. I mean, we die. If we're physical, no matter how much we can choose to master reality, there are limitations. And I think we choose those limitations, and we choose to learn from, the hardships and the joys and everything else. But my guess is that we are here in physical form to learn and to experience.
Hmm. What's your thoughts on this, Rich?
I think that's as close of an answer as we're going to get. That's what I get. The other thing I come away from these near-death experiences is that when they're out of here, they're like looking at their like when they're first out of their body and they're looking down at like they're looking at their body, and they said it's as meaningless to them as confetti paper. I mean, like they recognize that that's them, but it just doesn't. It's not really them. So, we put a lot of, when we're here, it's like, I get a lot of trouble, like to work out, to try to stay fit, to try to stay healthy, to keep a good brain, make sure you're taking the right supplements, you're doing everything that the technology that we have allows us to do, to maintain an edge with this body. Because it's kind of like our car sitting out in the driveway right now. You want that thing to be up and running good because, it takes you everywhere. So that's pretty much how I view my physical body. But in reality, we don't even know that we really reside, that our consciousness even resides in this body. Like the brain, is there any way it can really retain all this information and that we remember over the course of a lifetime? And maybe it's stored in a field outside of your brain. It's not really your brain. You could just be the interface or a receiver. I'm not, you know, even with a background, in psychology, with a little bit of physiology, I'm not convinced that what I've been told and what I've learned is the truth about how all of this functions. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
we have a body, but I'm not convinced that we're actually in it, or at least our memories in our brain. It seems like they're stored in a field outside of it
Oh,
or
yeah.
around it.
Perfect. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm in total agreement with you, Rich. I'll give you an example. Mobius and I, we've had several conversations about this on the air about how the universe operates on a certain frequency. And I don't care what the number is. That's irrelevant to me. But in other words, it's like a waveform. The top of the waveform, where this is the physical, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, the physical. The bottom part of the waveform, I think that's the spiritual. And if you look at this, that means that you spend half of your physical life in the spiritual world, and you're in the non-physical world. Where are you getting your intelligence from? Where are you getting your thoughts from? Where's the storehouse of memory and information? For example, geniuses are able to tap in, they come up with ideas, they're light years behind current technology. For example, where are they getting this from? I think it constantly exists, and they're better able to tap in that other half, that bottom part of that waveform, where they're into the oncology part of it, where they're into the ontology, excuse me, the ontology part of this, where they're into the spiritual side, where things do not physically exist. That's where information is. And that's what the universe is all about. It's information, it's the transference of information. That's what everything is. And if you don't have information, you don't have shit. It's kind of like the example of the hologram. Mobius and I were discussing this, the experiment where you have this hologram, you can take off a little piece of it or chip off a little piece of that hologram, and if you look at it, it retains all the information of the original hologram, even though it's a
yeah, you
small
can
sliver.
shatter it into a million pieces, and the whole image is still in each one of those.
Exactly, exactly. So in other words, even the smallest piece maintain is a part of the whole. It's entangled with the whole. Or with it's a part of everything. Everything is interconnected. And I think that's where the secret of this is. It's information. Again, the transference of information or energy. And so, and that's how I look at a lot of things here, in life. And I kind of look at life, for example, has a numerical value. Everything that you do has a numerical value. For example, you could pour a can of soda into a glass and watch it fizz. Those little micro bubbles that are being created from the carbonation of that soda, even that has a mathematical value to it. Okay, it has you put a number to it, and everything has a number to it. It's information. And I think I think it kind of goes back to that virtual reality thing that we were discussing earlier, where, this is basically a glorified computer program, and we're just on some kid's hard drive, and
And,
so
and you know what the glitches are is when whoever it is patches the software is when you detect the glitches.
exactly, like deja vu and that kind of a thing. Hell, I witness deja vu all the time. And people may think I'm crazy. Hell, we were discussing, I think the other night about, some of the glitches, like the Mandela effects, for example. I had this, showing people, if you look at this famous portraits in the Sistine Chapel, it shows God, breathing life into Adam. Okay, if you look at God's left hand, if you scan over it and you look at his left hand, it doesn't even look human. It looks sort of reptilian. It's not proportional. And I'm thinking, okay, you got this craftsman, this artist, and he's building this thing, and he's creating this painting on the ceiling of this church, and you're telling me that he is going to misproportion that hand is going to look funky compared to the rest of the portrait?
Yes,
I think
when he
not.
was when he was a master of proportion.
Yeah, exactly, Michelangelo. And so, and you're telling me that this guy is screwing around like that? I think not. I wondered, did he actually paint it that way, or has it changed? I wonder. And we go back to these geographical changes, about with the Mandela effect. And the reason why I hark on the Mandela effect, because it proves to me, in my mind, that's evidence that reality is fluid, that it's constantly changing. It's just that some of us are better able to see these changes than others. You know,
Even Candace Owen herself was talking about the Mandela effect before. She would be the last person I'd expect to be talking about it.
hmm hmm So I mean,
There's
It's that
logic,
obvious.
go ahead,
but there's
Mobius.
logic for the Mandela effect. We found that in quantum physics, when you look potentially at a light for a star that's taken millions of years to get here, you can, in effect, affect that star millions of years ago. But in quantum experiments, you can affect the past before the present and change the outcome. And we always
Retrocausality, it's called.
reverse exactly. And we always think that time is linear, and quantum physics has shown us that it's not. And the practicality of that experiment is a group of people took sealed envelopes with all the records from multiple hospitals with people during the plague. And they chose randomly, a small amount of envelopes, and they prayed diligently for the people's survival during the plague. In those envelopes in these hospitals, they had been hit with high levels of death. And after they completed a month of this, they opened the envelopes, and the death rate was like 25% in the hospitals, total 75% less than the others they had preyed on. And
hmm
that experiment is kind of cagey, I guess, because you could argue and you would have to do it over and over and over to call it a consistent result. But they keep doing experiments like that with consciousness into the past where they're like using closed parameters and they keep getting the same results. So this kind of like opens up why potentially the wishing machine works because you can affect the flow of reality, and so you have a better outcome. And it doesn't necessarily mean it starts right when you do it. It may start way back in the time stream. And the whole thing is just very, very confusing. Science, instead of like giving us clarity, is showing the universe is nothing like we could imagine it to be.
Yeah. Well, I think the observer effect comes into play here, and kind of getting back to what Rich was discussing earlier. Where does consciousness reside? And I had the very same conversation with a psychologist about this. I asked him, I said, where does consciousness reside? Does it reside in that sack of cholesterol that's between your ears, or is it outside of the physical body? And I was talking to what I considered a very, very talented engineer. Or a matter of fact, this guy, I think, won Inventor of the Year award twice in a row. And the guy was really, he was a very, very sharp guy. And he told me, he asked me, he said, what's the average how big is the average human, or how tall is the average human? I said, I don't know, what, 5'10", something like that, 5'9", 5'10", somewhere around there. And he said, no, he said it's about 263 feet. And I said, what do you mean 263 feet? He said the energy field around the human body is basically uh, the diameter of that field is 263 feet. In other words, you just the energy alone, that field that's around you, that some people may call an aura, uh, that right there is really, I think, is where the real work is happening, where we have consciousness, where it's residing. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, going back and forth, on the waveform. One part of that waveform, you're in the physical, the other part of it, you're in the spiritual. And I think that's where consciousness resides. I think all our brains are, it's just basically a radio transmitter and receiver, and something to keep our neurological system in check, so we're able to breathe and keep our heart beating and that kind of thing, able to function in this physical reality. What's your thoughts?
And when you talk to any psychologist or look at any psychology text to this day, they will tell you that they cannot define consciousness. The best they do is they say, well, consciousness is an epiphenomenon, and an epiphenomenon means, oh, and then a miracle occurs. So they it's kind of interesting that the whole basis of our being cannot be defined by science. It just can't be.
Mhm,
And it may well be that it's the fundamental building block of everything.
mhm. Oh yeah, and again, what makes you sentient? For example, we're talking about artificial intelligence. It doesn't have a soul. It's just basically an information scraper. Yeah, it can do calculations and do the things that gives it the appearance of intelligence, of able to put things together. But it needs human input in order to be the catalyst for it to do its job.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I work with it quite a bit. I've been working with it for probably well over a year now. I started using it as a tool to create slides for classes.
Hmm.
And before it would take me like maybe 3 weeks to put together like a really good set of explanatory slides with like vocal embeds in them and video embeds in them, you know, for an entire course. And once I started working with AI, it got faster and faster. I can turn out an entire course now in about 3 hours.
Hmm.
But but you see, for me, that's a good thing because it's a tool it's like almost like a colleague doing the heavy lifting for us. But I already know the material. But I'm digressing here a little bit, but
No.
I'm looking at like young people coming up and they're relying on this stuff. They're not learning critical thinking skills. It's far worse than calculators ever were,
Hmm.
because they're not even learning to think now. And I've been hearing from professors, I've been talking to a professor in Japan. She was telling me that she doesn't even do written assignments anymore because she knows that they can just hand in something that she said everything they hand in is written better than she can write because she can get it from AI. So she's gone to like in class, oral examinations now, as a proof of learning. That's where this has gotten so far.
Yeah,
It's that
exactly.
good, and it's so good, that when I get talk, so I prefer Grok 3 to ChatGPT.
Hmm.
ChatGPT, to me has up a bunch of woke guardrails. Like for example, one day I was asking about a holster, and it was obvious from my query that I'm not like some teenager looking to get a gun to do a Columbine.
Hmm.
And yet I'm getting a lecture from ChatGPT about gun safety. But if you go to Grok, it doesn't care about any of that stuff. It jumps right in. It writes the best science fiction. It's like it's better than talking to the Star Trek computer. I'm just amazed at how far this stuff has come, and we haven't seen anything yet. Once general artificial intelligence gets here in the next couple of years, I think people are going to be out of work. But
Yeah.
anyway, we're getting really far away from
Oh,
your topic.
oh yeah. No, not at all. That's where this is supposed to. That's how this goes. I try to make these shows as organic as possible and let it go where let the chips fall where they may. And I'll give you an example here. My brother. He's a lecturer at a major college in the southeast, and his thing is German. He's a linguist, and he said, "Well, you can't get a computer to read cursive in German." I said, "Oh, bullshit." I said, "Hell, if they can get artificial intelligence to decipher these burnout scripts from Pompeii, they sure as hell can decipher cursive, in German. I mean, I don't think it's an issue. Your job is being taken over by a computer, buddy. You better
Well,
th
they
find
don't want to
yourself."
admit it. Well, they're in denial about this, and I will give you. I have several axioms of propaganda, and I'll give you one of my favorites that and anybody can take them and use them for their own. It's fine with me. But the longer one has been immersed in the Western school system, academic system, and
Hmm.
that's whether it's professional school like medical school or law school or getting a PhD, the longer you've been subjected to that, the more propagandized that person is, the more indoctrinated they are, and the more usually misinformed or malinformed they are. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I've noticed this. Our educational system, these people, and I use this jokingly, but it's true. They're educated idiots. They can't think. They
Well,
believe every.
unless you're in engineering or a STEM profession today, and even then they try to throw the woke stuff at you. But it's not like, see, back in the day, when you got a classical education, you actually learned to think and reason and do logic and rhetoric. I mean, and you learn languages and you learn to think. That's not what happens today with a liberal arts education. A liberal arts education today is nothing but pure indoctrination.
Mhm. Oh, exactly.
I have a
Exactly.
wild card to throw in here for you.
Please go for it.
Okay, I have friends, they're in the entertainment industry, and one of them is kind of on the Lucas side. And here was his prediction. And, he is a master of AI, and he has the ability to generate AI videos now, and not the stupid stuff you see that, like six fingers or, stupid things.
Right.
But he is stipulating that as technology increases year by year, he thinks within 10 years you will have a box on your TV and that nothing is going to be able to stop it. And that you will like come home and decide you want to watch, say, a Star Trek movie, and that you want to see, Q meets the TOS cast, and you want an original movie. And so you give it all the parameters, and within 10 to 15 minutes, it will render either, a 60-minute show or however much time you have, a 90-minute movie, and
Hmm.
it will be picture perfect. And if the template is good, you will share a template with others. So it can render the same thing. But he said it will be your newscaster. Everything that will be done, it will create for your liking, and that there will be no mass media.
Hmm.
That is just not possible. And he said the cost to create this will be nothing. And he doesn't imagine how Hollywood is going to fund itself.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
telling you this is not theoretical. He already says that 20%, maybe 25 of all the backgrounds in all of the Disney movies are AI. He said
Hmm.
they don't go out and film them. There are very few extras. They're actually there. And he says many times that they need reshoots and that they're done as AI. And even the actors themselves do not know that they've been recreated. It's so good.
Hmm.
So that is how AI, you're talking about illusion and reality. I mean, that would be the point that you get to an area where what you see and what you experience cannot be distinguished between the two.
Hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, for example, our good friend Joshua P. Warren, he was talking about AI, and he kind of felt like, oh, this is demented, or it's corrupted and whatever. I said, well, of course, considering some of the people that have put this AI together, or some of these platforms such as ChatGPT, of course, it's going to be a little steered differently towards something that we would not consider wholesome. And but the thing about it is the things that it can do. I mean, now he's able to create music, videos, that kind of a thing. I mean, hell, I was thinking about doing a project of having AI come up with another version of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. In other words, have
Exactly.
it.
You listen, I can give you the music. I've already made it. I made things for our little dog Teddy on AI that did not exist before I created them with various styles. So what you are talking about, you can do that for free right now.
Mhm.
Another thing you can do right now, if you're sick and you have symptoms and you don't know what they are, you can go to Doctronics, uh, and it's an online doctor, and it is
This-
so good that both Rich's doctor and my doctor have said that this is going to replace a general physician, and that the only time that you're going to need to go to an actual doctor is for test or treatment that has to be physically done. And I don't mean it's sort of good. I mean that you feed in, it asks like 10 questions and it comes up with the most obscure but totally correct diagnosis that you could imagine. And it's that good.
mhm.
So we're talking about in every way possible. The only thing that this thing is not going to do is build your house. And I
Yet.
might be excited because it may be a 3D printer at some point that can.
Oh yeah, they're already doing 3D printing of houses, of structures. And
I've seen it.
yeah, and I mean with the robot technology they have now, I mean you're not going to be having construction workers out there. You're going to have robots building a house. And you know what? They're working 24/7. They don't take lunches off. They don't care how hot it is, how cold it is, or whatever. If it's raining, snowing, they don't, it's irrelevant to a robot. All it cares
Yep.
about
And
is, go ahead.
and 3D printed houses at that.
Exactly. On top of all this, and I think we're rapidly, and I see this. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and by the time that child gets to be, 30 or 40, I think she's going to be living in a world that more closely resembles Star Trek than it does today. I think they're going to have the replicators and all this other stuff. Because once you realize what matter is and how it works, it really changes your perspective. It really does. And I think
I'm
that
going to
Tesla,
jump in. Let
go
me
ahead.
add something here. This is exactly what you're talking about. Okay, we've discussed a lot of things, a lot of information and theoretical things here,
Hmm.
but Rich and I both have third generation night vision.
Hmm.
He's got a set of PVS 14s and I've got a set of PVS 7s, and we love looking at the sky. And of course, you see a million shooting stars with night vision. It's like
Hmm.
10,000 times gain for the amount of light. You see just a sky that could not be believed. I need to send you a photo so you can put it
Oh
or
yeah.
include it in the chat. But here's what we see that cannot be explained. So you're looking around, and I've actually seen this. Joshua Warren and I both together saw this one night, and we know the sky. So all of a sudden you see a bright star and you're confused. You're like, wait a second. There shouldn't be a planet there. And I don't remember there, being a significantly bright star there. And so you look at it. And at first I didn't catch on to the game, but you keep passing over as you do the sky and you just like, I don't know what that is. Well, now you've got, Google night sky and you could identify it. But back, this is going back 20 years. Uh, when you're looking at it and you're like, wait a second, you know what happens all the time with these just objects pretending to be stars? They're sitting, obviously in orbit, and
Hmm.
they're there for like maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes. They will just simply energize up and take off. And when I say take off, many times it looks like at an angle that they just zoom like out of way away from the Earth's, like distance into deep space. And I had told Rich about this a lot. Now, Rich, you yourself as an observer, what have you seen like this?
Well, I used to hear you say this, and I thought, well, I'm sure he's seeing something, but I don't know what. But I kind of just blew it off, and I wasn't being disrespectful. It's just like it didn't fit into my notions of how the world worked, and so I spend a lot of time outside. I've been like a little amateur astronomer since I was 12 years old when I got my first telescope, and so I've always looked at the night sky. And with all the tools we have now, it's easy to know where just about everything is. There's nothing you can't really identify. And I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I'm out there. It's like late at night. I'm like laying back, looking up at the sky with my night vision, and I'm going, looking at satellites, and I'm seeing like a kind of a bright star, and I'm thinking, why is that there? What is that? And I go to look it up, and I don't see it on my chart, and then the next thing I know, I'm looking at it, it sort of like jumps around. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a perceptual distortion on my part, that my eyes, your eyes will jiggle a little bit in your head, so maybe that's what's happening because I'm focusing too hard on it. And then, like you said, zoom, it's like at a sharp angle, away it goes
We've seen this now like hundreds
multiple
of times.
times.
Yeah, and I've only a few times caught it, but I've caught the orbital triangular craft, and it appears to be probably solid, although it could be like a V shape, because I can't guarantee always the center, but sometimes it has a light on the center and usually has 3 or 4 lights on the side. It's definitely orbiting, and I would say it's military. So we know we don't have to guess. We've seen things that we know do not fit. Objects in orbit cannot be stationary. That's not possible. They're in free fall. And we have seen this so many times. And I would tell him that, and I knew he was being polite. This guy is a very, very grounded person. And I'm like, you wait until you get the PVS 14s and you see this. You have to see it to believe it.
Hmm.
This is a stationary, anti-gravity type thing. And then it just goes kazoom and it goes like into deep space. When you see it, Once you see it, you'll never be able to deny it. So I've converted him. He no longer rolls his eyes at me because he's now seen it. He's seen it a zillion times himself. Once you see it, you can't deny it.
You
Right.
know, and I'll tell you what, another thing that's happened too, I think with a lot of us, especially since the events of, let's say, 2020, to put it mildly, I think that the trust that people used to have in everything from the federal government to the medical establishment, especially, you know, to anything else we've been told growing up, including our origin stories, you know, and how the world works. I question everything now because I get the impression we've been lied to our whole lives about just about everything.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's like, for example, the Great Wall of China. If you look at it, they have like, positions for the archers. It was not to keep people out of China. It was to keep the Chinese inside of China. It was there to basically create a boundary between China and the rest of Asia. Or I guess it'd be what,
The
Russia now?
barbarian world.
Yeah, the barbarian world. So who the hell built the Great Wall of China? Because it sure as hell wasn't the Chinese. Because it's set up to defend themselves against the Chinese, not the Chinese to defend themselves against other people, against the invaders. And so, I mean, all this other stuff that we're being told, Tartaria, for example, I think was it Ottawa, out of Canada, the capital of Canada. They have buildings there that apparently have been there before Canadians ever came into Canada.
Remember the world fairs that took place back in the turn of the century,
Right.
and what huge events they were, and they built these magnificent structures and then just tore them down. It's like
Uh-huh.
we don't see anything like that anymore. And you look at things like these cathedrals, like all, you know, all especially in Europe, and how long they took to build them. And it's they're just incredible structures. And you're telling me that people that long ago built these with artisans with these just like they didn't even have power tools. You know,
It-
I can't imagine building a barn without a, I can't imagine building anything without power tools. And it was
it-
not, you know, it's just, but the craftsmanship, the workmanship is just incredible.
I mean, yeah, example. What about the intel that came out about the pyramids over in
Oh, I was going to
Egypt?
bring that up. I'm glad you did. Oh yeah, and now
Please
the
go ahead,
structures
proceed.
underneath of it.
Yeah,
No, I was
proceed.
just, you know, you probably are more up on it than me, but you know, I've heard about like the what was the synthetic aperture radar stuff or some tech that they were used to observe it from space, you know, and that there are these uniform structures under it that go kilometers deep. It's you know, I wish you would elaborate on it more because you probably are more up to date on it than me. I
Yeah,
just
yeah. I mean, well, that right there tells you that the pyramids are older than a few thousand years, and no, they weren't built by Jewish slaves, like in like
Like Ben Hur.
yeah, Ben-Hur or Ten Commandments and all this other. That's bullshit.
You know, the
It's
Sumerians talk about all these myths long before the Bible stories came in, especially like you know, the Great Flood. That's in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I just read that not long ago. I ordered it. You
mhm.
know, it was originally written in Sumeria cuneiform, but you know, it's been translated into English, and it was like the first novel ever written, or like, and it's the same, it's all, a lot of the same stories, or you. You look at the Sphinx, like there's erosion, like water erosion around it that happened over thousands of years.
Yeah.
So, you know, and all of these dating techniques that have been used, turns out that they're not accurate. You know,
Yeah.
we've been sold a bill of goods. And then there's something like mainstream archaeology. They do not want to talk about anything that's outside of their model.
Oh yeah, exactly, because it doesn't work with their paradigm, and it changes everything over, and they don't want to have to rewrite the textbooks. I'm thinking to myself, so what you're doing is you're perpetuating a lie. You're
Well, of
perpetuating,
course.
yeah, and it's like anything else. A student, garbage in, garbage out, and so you're telling these kids a bunch of lies. They have a strange outlook or the unreal outlook on life, and they're paying uh, thousands and thousands of dollars in tuition to be lied to. I don't see
Yep,
that.
and you step out of that box when you're in your graduate program and write something contrary to the official doctrine, you're not going to get your doctorate, buddy.
Oh yeah. Well, I got an honorary doctorate, so I don't give a shit now. Anyway.
The latest radar scan said it was something like that they could observe 13 stories deep and, multiple structures and almost a city-like, nature to it and these great pillars. So, I mean, this deep scanning radar from space is definitely, I'm not going to 100%, say that it's there until somebody sees it. But if what they are seeing from space and claim with the radar is there, I think Edgar Casey has won because, he predicted what about this time that we were going to
Yep.
find the library of all knowledge buried under the Sphinx. And, everybody always thought, this guy was goofy because he made a prediction that was so far off. Well, you know what? If this is accurate and all of this turns out to be, knowledge and history that we don't know, he's going to have to like somebody's going to have to go back and award this guy. He nailed it, and he even nailed accurately the time that it would be found, because he wasn't speaking in years; he was speaking in decades.
Oh yeah. I mean, and again, it goes back to what we are talking about. Everything you see around you is an illusion. And if this is real, you're being fed bullshit to make,
Yep.
you're not even being told the truth. So where are you supposed to go with this? And guys, I mean, because of this, I question everything. You talk about critical thinking. I am my learning curve or my ramp for critical thinking has gone up exponentially in the last few years. Just from what I've seen, my observations of reality. Okay, it looks like we're starting to wind down again. Do you guys want to do another 30 minutes? It's entirely up to you. I'm good if you're good. It's up to you. How do you feel?
Let's come back and follow up in a week and
Okay,
see
let's
what
do it in a
we've
week.
got.
Okay, let's do it in a week. All right, guys. Well, anyway, on that note, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I'll be, just hang on here after this is over, and we'll have a conversation. Fair enough?
Okay,
All
fair
right.
enough.
Cool beans. We'll
All
do.
right. All right. Let me go ahead and shut this down. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I will talk to you later. Good day.